Hey folks, Skip here. I see the same 5 washer failures come through this shop every single week. And I can't tell you how many people are ready to throw their machines away when it's actually a simple fix. So let me walk you through what I see, what it costs, and which ones are worth fixing. Now, the first thing I'm going to tell you is this. Not all washer problems are created equal. Some of these are cheap, simple fixes that you can do yourself, but others can get expensive enough that you need to stop and think whether the machine's worth the money. All right, let's start with the first one. I see it all the time. Number one is going to be a drain pump problem. This is the one where the washer won't drain, or you hear it humming and nothing's happening. Now, a lot of times people think the machine is completely dead, but what's usually going on here is something that's gotten into the pump, like a coin, a sock, lint buildup, something that's jamming the impeller. And sometimes the pump itself fails, but most of the time it's just blocked. And cost-wise, these are usually on the lower end. You're typically looking at anywhere from $30 to $100 for the part, depending on the machine. And in many cases, this is something a homeowner can handle if they're comfortable getting into it. I've had plenty of these come into the shop where all it needed was to clear something out of the pump, and the machine was back up and running. The front-load machines seem to be the worst for this. And a lot of times, all the customer really needed to do was clean the lint filter, if their model even has one. And they didn't realize that that's all they had to do. I've also noticed that some newer GE top-load models tend to have more water pump problems than their Whirlpool counterpart. The more robust pumps are the older designs that were driven directly off the motor, as you see in some of these Whirlpool and Speed Queen units. And those original Maytag machines that were belt driven, some of those pumps are still going strong after 30 years. Now, these newer pumps, they use small self-contained electric motors, and it's those that I see failing the most. Now, as far as the repair side of this, most top-load machines they're actually pretty straightforward. The pump's usually accessible from the bottom, and in many cases you can reach it without tearing the whole machine apart. That's why I say this is one that many homeowners can handle if they're comfortable working on equipment. Now, models like your LGs and your Samsungs, you may have to remove the back panel to access the mounting screws, then work from underneath to swap the pump out. And this is where you need to be careful. Those manufacturers often use an adhesive to seal the hoses to the tub and the pump. And if those hoses aren't seated properly and sealed again, when you put them back together, they can work themselves loose, and when that happens, you're going to have water everywhere, and that can turn a simple repair into a real mess in a hurry. And as for front load machines, especially the ones where you have to remove the front panel and deal with that door boot, that's a different level of job. Now, those can be done, and I've got videos showing how to do most of them, but that's where you need to seriously consider whether you're going to be comfortable taking that job on. For a lot of folks, that's better left to a professional. So when you're looking at one of these failures, don't just think about the part cost. Think about how difficult it is to actually get to it and do the repair correctly. The number two is lid switches or lid locks or door locks. Now, this is another one I see constantly. The machine won't start, or it'll start and then just stop, or it won't go into spin, and may sit there and just click, 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 click. A lot of modern machines rely on that lid lock, or the lid switch, or the door lock to tell that control board that it's going to be safe to run. And when that switch fails, the machine just won't do anything. Now, these parts are usually not that expensive. You're generally in the $20 to $80 range, and in many cases, this is a pretty straightforward repair. This is one of those I replace all the time, and a lot of people assume it's something much bigger than it really is. Now, when it comes to the repair side of this, it really depends on the machine. On top load units, you usually have to get into the console to access the control board, and in many cases, the wiring has to be traced back and disconnected from the cabinet top panel where the lock is actually located. Now, some models make it more difficult to get into the top panel than others, so I always recommend watching a video for your specific machine before you start. Different manufacturers secure those tops in different ways, and knowing what you're dealing with ahead of time
can save you a lot of frustration. Once you get access to the lock, the job itself is usually pretty straightforward. You remove the old lock and trace the wiring back to where it connects to the control board, unplug it, plug a new one in, and reinstall. On some Whirlpool style machines like the Amana, the lid lock snaps into the top, and those can often be removed by placing a nut driver against the left side of the lock and giving it a sharp rap to release it. But be careful because others models have screws underneath it that's secured in place. And some G models are even simpler than that. They use a small lock assembly that can be accessed and replaced without removing the entire top or chasing that wiring harness all the way back to the control board. And once you remove the bezel and unclip the lock, you can pull it forward into the tub opening and unplug it and swap it out and replace it. Now, in your older Whirlpool style machines, they use only a lid switch instead of a lock, and some of these are very easy to replace. In one common style, you remove the two screws on the back corners of the console, or you can release the clips at the front corners with a thin putty knife. And you kind of rotate the console up and forward, and you tilt it up out of the way, and that exposes the switch that's in the left-hand corner of the machine. Now you can unplug it. There's a 3-wire plug there, and you unplug it. You remove the 5/16 inch screw there with a nut driver, and we need to lift the lid slightly to clear the little rod that actuates the switch on the lid. And then you depress the clip at the back of the old switch and just lift it out. Now, if the machine uses the pin style striker on the lid, the cabinet must be removed, and you need to tilt it forward to access the wiring and the ground screw. Now, the switch is mounted just under the lid opening, and it can be removed by removing a couple of screws. When you lift the lid, you'll see the two screws that keep it mounted there. And once you understand which style you have, these repairs are usually they're pretty manageable. Now, in your front load door locks, they're more challenging. In most cases, you need to remove the top cover of the front loader, loosen the door boot so you can reach in, unplug the lock, and you pull it out through the opening that you have there between the door boot and the front panel. And it's doable, but it's more involved. It can vary depending on the make and model. And for a lot of folks, that's where it makes sense to call a professional. So again, just like with the pump, don't just look at the part cost. Look at how difficult it is to access and replace on your particular machine. Now, number 3 is our suspension problems. Now, this is where the washer is banging around, going out of balance, maybe even walking across the floor. People tell me all the time, this thing sounds like it's about to tear itself apart, and they assume that the whole machine is done. But a lot of times it's just more suspension problems. Now, these are what keep the tub stable during the spin cycle, and when they wear out, the machine can't control that movement anymore. And cost-wise, you're looking at between $60 and $150 for a set. And this repair can often be done at home if you take your time and you do it carefully. Now, I want to stress something here. This is one you don't want to ignore. Continued use of a machine when it's out of balance can cause serious damage. And I see cracked outer tubs, bent spin baskets, splash guards that are just torn completely to pieces from people continuing to run a machine that's already out of balance. If you bend a tub on an agitator style machine, sometimes it can be corrected, and I have videos for that. But on the newer wash plate machines, once that tub gets distorted, it's usually a lost cause. Now, as for the repair itself, you're going to have to remove the top of the cabinet, and often the console as well. And on some brands, especially the LG and the Samsungs, it gets more involved. And in many cases, that's where I'd say you may consider having a professional handle it. If you do decide to take it on yourself, there are plenty of videos out there showing how to do it, and I recommend watching several of them so you understand the process before you even start. And one word of caution here, you're going to see a lot of videos and ideas about fixing suspension rods, trying to re-engineer them. And almost all of those are temporary fixes at best. And most of them fail pretty quickly. You're far better off replacing them with your proper set of OEM suspension rods. I also recommend avoiding aftermarket rods. I've seen many of those not perform correctly. So stick with original equipment parts, and you're going to save yourself the headache of having to go back into the machine after just a few loads. So again, this is one where the part cost isn't terrible, but the damage from ignoring it can be. And once you have replaced the rods, if your machine is still out of balance, then you have either got a bent spin basket or a worn out pedal. And I have videos showing how to correct both of these issues. But changing this spline insert in a Whirlpool style machine may be more than the average do-it-yourselfer is willing to tackle. Now for number 4, well, this is where things start getting a little more expensive, and that's going to be control board issues. And this is where you start seeing strange behavior. The machine won't complete cycles, it acts erratically, buttons don't respond correctly, the drain pump may run continuously, or the machine just won't operate the way it should. When a washer starts doing things that don't make sense, it's often because of the control board. Now this is where the cost jumps. You're often looking at a couple $100 just for the part. And depending on the machine, the total repair cost can climb up from there. In my shop, I do offer used control boards for some Whirlpool style machines, usually around $89, because I salvage them from units that were taken out of service for other reasons, often from people who didn't address the out of balance problems in time. Now this is where I have a real conversation with the customer about whether the repair makes sense. If I've got a good used control board on hand, it can be a very reasonable fix. But if I have to order a new board, the cost can get high enough that you need to seriously consider the machine's value. Now, as far as the repair itself, this one takes a little more care. You'll need to remove the console, pull the control knob off the shaft of the control board, and unplug quite a few wiring connections. Now, if you're not used to doing this kind of work, I strongly recommend taking clear pictures with your phone before you disconnect anything. That gives you a reference when it's time to put it all back together. Now, once the wire is disconnected, you remove the mounting screws, lift the old board out, and install the new one. Now, one habit I always follow is marking that old board with a wax pencil or a Sharpie. Just put an X on it. It's easy to get turned around and forget which board is the new one once you've got them both sitting there side by side. Now, let's talk about static electricity. In humid areas, it's less of an issue, but on dry days, it can absolutely damage the control board. And before you touch anything electronic, ground yourself. You can use a grounding strap or just find a grounding screw on the cabinet and touch it. Touch any bare metal part on the cabinet right before you handle that board. And when you're putting everything back together, take your time. Make sure every connector is fully seated and that you didn't miss anything. Most plugs are keyed, so they're only going to go where they belong, but it's still worth double checking your work. And don't forget to reconnect that pressure hose to the pressure transducer on the board. If that gets left off, you can end up with an overfill situation and mess up your whole laundry room. Always unplug the machine before starting this kind of repair also, and make sure you're grounded before handling the board. So this is one repair that's doable, but between the cost and the care required, it's also one where you need to think twice before jumping in. And finally, number 5 is the big one, transmission or gearcase problems. This is when the machine won't spin, you hear grinding, it sounds like a jet engine spooling up, or you start seeing leaks from worn seals. This is internal wear in the drive system itself. Now, one telltale sign from this is that I look for is rusty water on the pulley guard underneath the machine, or maybe a greasy, dirty ring around the inside of the cabinet at about the height of the drive pulleys. That's a strong indicator that the gear case seals have failed, and the oil is starting to work its way out along with dirty wash water. However, an oily ring on a direct drive Whirlpool style machine that's built before 2010 doesn't necessarily indicate a bad transmission. That indicates failed seals on the center post or the transmission shaft that sits above the transmission. Now at that point, you're usually looking at several $100s for the repair, sometimes more, and that's where you really have to stop and think about whether the machine is worth that kind of investment. Personally, I usually advise replacing the machine here. And if a customer still wants to move forward with the repair, I'll often recommend that they take it to another shop. And the reason is simple. Once you get into a repair at this level, you can fix one major component and then a month later something else fails, maybe like a control board. And when that happens, people tend to look back at the last repair and expect it to have solved everything, even though it's a completely separate issue. For some reason it becomes your fault and they want to blame you for that. So that very costly repair could be followed by another costly repair, and it's not worth the hassle. I have had people mad at me for doing, doing costly repairs and then a month later another costly repair comes up. They could have bought a new machine. So now as far as the repair itself, this is not a job for most do-it-yourselfers. You're talking about completely dismantling the machine. The top has to come off. The agitator wash plate comes out. The spin basket has to be removed. And then the motor and the drive components have to be taken off just to get down to the transmission. And once you're there, the new gear case may require seals to be properly installed and seated, and then everything has to be reassembled correctly. And along the way, you're often going to find other warm components that need attention, which can add to both time and cost. So this is one where I strongly recommend having a professional handle it, or at least getting a solid guidance before even attempting it yourself. And honestly, on most modern machines, a transmission or gear case failure is usually the point where replacement makes more sense than repairing the machine. Now, in older machines like the Whirlpool direct drive units, those can absolutely be worth fixing. They were built differently and they tend to justify the work, but even then, it's still a major repair that's well beyond the comfort level of most do-it-yourself homeowners. So this one right here, this is the line in the sand for a lot of machines. Now here's the takeaway I want you to have from this. A lot of washers get replaced that could have been fixed for under $100. And on the flip side, some machines get money put in them that probably shouldn't have. The key is knowing what you're dealing with before you make that decision. So before you go out and replace your washer, you need to watch this next video right here, because if you're at the point where you're tired of dealing with repairs, I break down which machines are actually built to last and might be the right pick for you. Thanks for watching. Chip is out.